Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started. I'm just going to ask you to please turn off your cell phones to avoid any interruptions in the program. If you don't want your photo taken, please let the Surrey Board of Trade staff know. We do use photos for both internal and external publications. Good morning and welcome to this morning's Surrey Hot Topic Dialogue focused on the untapped economic potential of the Fraser River. I'm Anita Huberman, CEO of the Surrey Board of Trade. And ladies and gentlemen, as you are listening to this morning's panelists, I want you to think about questions. I want you to think about comments. We all know the topography on the Surrey side of the Fraser River. You're going to hear about the great work that the city of New Westminster is engaging in on the quay. And really, we need to work together as cities to be a connector, not only through water, but also through land. We want that waterfront to be a destination. The Fraser River is a working river. It's a Canadian gateway, and we've emphasized that to the federal government through the Surrey Board of Trade's advocacy work to instigate that change. But now we want to focus on what we can do to make it a destination. But I think it's also important to understand that we want to attract more business to the Surrey side. We want to work with the City of New Westminster. We're going to be creating a plan through the Surrey Board of Trade's Development and Land Use team and the Surrey Board of Trade's International and Industry team. We want to explore opportunities because Surrey is a border city, to work with Cascadia on the corridor, in Bellingham, etc. So the opportunity is immense, and we must have action now because these plans take so long. And we all need to be singing from the same song sheet and be ambassadors for Surrey and for the region. I wanted to mention also, of course, we want to be working with our Indigenous First Nation groups as well to explore economic development opportunities. And we've already started to do that outreach, and some are in the audience this morning. We acknowledge the land on which we gather is the traditional and unceded territory of our Coast Salish people, specifically the Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen First Nation. And of course, events like this simply would not take place without sponsorship. So let's give a great round of applause to our community sponsor, the Port of Vancouver. At our Business and International Trade Center at the Surrey Board of Trade, if you're starting a business, need business support, or need international trade connections or documentation, it's there for you to utilize. And of course, we couldn't do that without our sponsorship partners, so the law firm of Fasken, the accounting firm of PwC, and the Chambers of Commerce Group Insurance Plan represented by S&F Benefits. Let's give them a great round of applause. I'd also like to thank the Surrey Now Leader, as well as Surrey's radio station, Pulse FM 107.7, and of course our great partner, the Newton Business Improvement Association. Thank you so much. Now, you are in this beautiful hotel. It's brand new, actually, and we're so pleased to be able to utilize it for Surrey Board of Trade events. And our venue sponsor, the Civic Hotel, has just been an amazing partner for the Surrey Board of Trade. And this property really adds to the vibrancy of our downtown core. So to tell you a little bit more about this venue and, of course, their sponsorship of this event, from the Civic Hotel, please help me welcome Kimberly Falconer.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Just wanted to say a welcome on behalf of us here at the Civic Hotel Autograph Collection at Surrey Centre. As Anita said, we're really excited to be a part of this community and just have sort of reached our 1-year anniversary here, so we're still working out quirks, but every event is sort of a growing opportunity for us, so we really appreciate the support of the Surrey Board of Trade and its members as well. I'm the catering and sales manager here, myself as well as Jillian Elijah, who you may have seen up here as well. If you ever have any meeting needs, event needs, big or small, we have lots of different size meeting rooms here at the Civic Hotel, some with beautiful views overlooking the plaza, which is kind of nice if you're doing an intimate meeting. Please reach out to us. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed your breakfast that the culinary team prepared and enjoy the presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. So I'm going to ask my panelists to please proceed to the stage. And just a reminder again, we're going to be, this is all about dialogue. It's all about ideas. It's about brainstorming and instigating change. And we are recording this morning's session, so we want to hear from you after each panelist speaks. So each panelist is going to speak for 10 minutes, just to give you a foundation to percolate some of those ideas in your mind. And they're both all going to speak in turn, and then we're going to proceed right into dialogue. So first, let's welcome Stephen Bruyneel, Director of External Relations and Development at the Fraser River Discovery Center. Thank you so much for attending. Then we have Lisa Leblanc, Manager of Transportation at the City of New Westminster. And Jeff Scott, CEO of Fraser Surrey Docks. All right, Stephen, you're on.
Well, thank you very much, Anita, and it's great to be here to talk about the Fraser River, something I try to do as much as I can, and look for opportunities everywhere to do that. To start, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Fraser River Discovery Center. Probably most of you don't know what it is or haven't visited us, so I thought I'd give you a little background, because that will also influence some of the ideas and the opportunities that I see for the Fraser River as we move forward. We're a 17,000 square foot interpretive center. We're right on the New Westminster waterfront, just east of the River Market and the New Westminster Quay. And our mission is to be the voice of the Fraser, in presenting the stories of the Fraser River and their contributions to the life, history, and future of British Columbia. By doing that, we hope to achieve our vision of connecting communities in the discovery and celebration of the living, working Fraser River. So we do 4 main things at the Discovery Center to try to achieve our mission and our vision. First is, like a lot of interpretive centers, we have permanent and temporary exhibits on 2 floors. And they're obviously related to the Fraser River, but in a whole bunch of different ways. So for example, we have ones related to First Nations, one on salmon catching and drying in the Fraser Canyon called Our Bones Are Made of Salmon. And our newest one, which we opened a couple years ago, and Fraser Surrey Docks is a partner of ours in that, which we really appreciated, called Journey Through the Working River. It tells the economic story of the Fraser River through our sustainability lens. So exhibitry is a big part of what we do. Perhaps the biggest part of what we do is education, and particularly with respect to students. We have what we call our River School program, which are school programs for grades K to 9, and it's been very successful. Since we launched it in 2009, we've put almost 19,000 students through River School from 450 schools in the Lower Mainland, the Fraser Valley, and even as far away as Vancouver Island. So very popular. One of the popular things about the programs is they're all linked to the BC curriculum. So teachers get not only credit for taking their kids to something that's fun and interactive, they actually get teaching credit for coming through our programs. Public engagement is the third pillar in terms of what we do. We do programs similar to this, and Anita and I have talked about this idea for a while. We do 3 or 4 different kinds of programs, from informal to issues-based. Informally, we have people come in on Saturdays and talk about what it's like to live on the Fraser or grow up on the Fraser River, show pictures, slides, artifacts, things like that. We do dialogues, and Anita mentioned the word dialogue, on Fraser River issues. We've done a number of these on some very important and sometimes controversial issues related to the Fraser River. We've done Fraser River salmon with the Pacific Salmon Foundation. We did LNG with Fortis BC with their LNG development. We've done emergency planning and response, Western Canada Marine Response Corporation, and we've done flood control and even land use, which I think will be a big topic here today with a panel representing different land use issues. And we started last year a biodiversity speaker series where we formed partnerships with local academics, and we went to the river, different spots in the basin, and we did walk and talks with the professors about different aspects of biodiversity. And our first one actually last year was at Surrey Bend Regional Park. We've been very successful. And the last thing we do is events to celebrate the Fraser River. Two main ones. Last week we did our annual Hall of Fame, Fraser River Hall of Fame induction and gala ceremony, and we put Pacific Custom Log Sorting from Coquitlam into the Hall of Fame. And Riverfest, every year, the last weekend in September, it's a celebration of BC and World Rivers Day, and we host that, and we get up to 10,000 people who come down to the riverfront every year. So that's what we do, but how we do it, I think, is just as important, and there's two key things there. We always look at the Fraser River and everything we do with respect to the Fraser from a triple bottom line perspective. So it's always the environmental and the economic and the sociocultural. It's that three-legged stool analogy that the river will only be sustainable and survive if all of those legs are working together at the same time. So that runs through everything that we do at the center. And the other thing we do when we engage is we do it in a respectful, fact-based, non-political, and safe environment. I do all the facilitation for the engagement that we do, and everyone is welcome. We love passion, we love different ideas, but you gotta behave. There are too many examples in our society these days, unfortunately, where people come and all they do is yell at each other. That's not enjoyable, and it also keeps people away. And so those are the rules of our engagement, and I think it makes us somewhat unique in the Lower Mainland. There aren't a lot of places where you can go and do that. So now I want to talk about three sets of opportunities that we see for the Fraser River going forward. The first ones are around the economics or tourism side of things. I'm not going to talk about some of the industrial ones. I'm sure Jeff will talk about, although I have some views on those too. But tourism we see all along the river, including in Surrey, to be completely an untapped market. We get, millions of people coming to the region every year within the region and from outside of the region and other countries. And the Fraser River should be a place where they want to go. And it can be as simple as one idea. Why can't we have more docks and mooring stations along the river where people can bring their pleasure boats, and instead of driving by our communities, they can dock, climb up, and then visit the communities and enjoy the benefits of the businesses and the restaurants and the other places. That would be a relatively simple one to do. Another one is boat tours of the Fraser and the communities and the things along the riverfront. We have one outlet in Westminster that has a paddle wheeler, and they do these tours, including up through Surrey, and they're very, very successful. But they do it from New Westminster, and they don't stop anywhere. They can't stop on the Surrey side or down in Delta or even up through into Port Coquitlam or further. So an expansion of that, whether it's new companies or relationships with the existing company, I think would bring tremendous benefits. Obviously, there's the revenue one and the jobs with respect to that. But I think the social and the environmental ones would be just as important. As part of those tours, they talk about the history of the river and how the river interacts with the communities and how they developed over time. And that really builds a sense of how important the river has been to our development in the Lower Mainland, in the province, and really as a nation. And environmentally, they talk about some of the facts a lot of people don't know, or the misperceptions about the river. How many salmon, how many birds migrate or fly over. And also the fact that, yes, the Fraser can be a pretty brown river at times, but it's not polluted. It's got a lot of silt in it. So I think there are some environmental benefits from that as well. The next set of opportunities are in the category of sociocultural, but I think that they're broader than that, and they're related to reconciliation. Everyone knows that with the Government of Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Report, and with both Canada and British Columbia having adopted the United Nations recognition of Indigenous peoples, that there are a lot of things that need to be done by communities, by local governments, and by businesses with respect to reconciliation. But I think we would all agree that a lot more needs to be done, and I think communities, a lot of them are struggling as to what to do and how to do it. Well, we think the Fraser River could help with that. First Nations have been living on and using the Fraser River forever. And so why not look at least part of reconciliation from the perspective of the Fraser River? So what could that mean? I mean, I think the sky is the limit. At the center in New Westminster, we've been talking to the Musqueam people, we've talked to the city of New Westminster. Could we be one of the places where people could come and talk about and learn and engage on reconciliation? But it wouldn't just have to be here. We could do it in Surrey. You have your own municipal museums. We could do it in other communities. You could do it on the river as well. It's something that the Musqueam, as an example, are really interested in doing. And I think the major benefit, I mean, I think there would be some revenue benefits for that, but I think the major benefit would be social. It's hard to have a discussion about reconciliation when you don't understand the baseline of what it is. And if we can build that understanding at the center and in other places, in other communities, I think then you can have larger conversations around how to move forward with reconciliation. So I think tremendous benefits there. I mean, if there are exhibits and programming around that, I think that would also be a tourism opportunity where people would want to come and see and hear what we're doing. The last area of opportunities, I'm putting it under an environmental category, but again, I think there's other ones, other benefits to it. And that is using the river or going to the river to explore its environment and biodiversity. And the biodiversity speaker tours that we did last year were tremendously successful. I mean, what we found is that regardless of the communities we went to, and we were everywhere from Surrey to Pacific Spirit Park to the Rifle Bird Sanctuary in Richmond, people, old, young, families, they want to get out. They want to go somewhere and see nature and not just hear about it, but talk about it. And so I think there's opportunities in Surrey and other places to do that. Just drive over the bridges, take the SkyTrain, look at the beautiful land that is down there. Could we not set up, relationships with academics and actually do tours of all that? It could make a little bit of money. We haven't lost money on ours, but I think again the bigger thing would be to build this Fraser River community and this understanding of how important it is. So in conclusion. Those are just some of the opportunities. There's lots more. I could talk for another hour. I'll leave it with this. If you're interested, if you have ideas, if you like some of these ideas, come and talk to us. We want to help increase understanding and opportunities for a sustainable Fraser River. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm pleased to be here this morning. I am assuming, there we go. So the angle that I'm going to take in introducing New Westminster's riverfront is from a transportation perspective. I'm the manager of transportation. I can answer some questions around the other elements of the city's riverfront vision, but I'm really going to focus on transportation, on connectivity, and on multimodal transportation in particular. In 2016, Council adopted a riverfront vision. It incorporates the full riverfront throughout the city. So we've got a downtown riverfront, but we also have riverfront along the entire edge of the Fraser River, in addition to the Bruyneel River over in the Sapperton area, in addition to Queensborough. So when we think about our riverfront vision, we're looking at the entire riverfront, not just the mainland downtown part. The vision is supported by these three goals: continuity, so having a continuous network of greenways and parks along the entire riverfront. Connectivity, meaning providing connections from all neighborhoods in the city to the river, really connecting, really bringing the city to the river and bringing the river out to the rest of the city and the rest of the region. And activity is the third goal, so having programming and animation that really supports activity at the riverfront. As I said, today I'm going to focus on connectivity. So this is an image of the regional greenway network. Some of it is complete, some of it remains to be done. New West, similar to Surrey, is in a really advantageous location in the city, in the region. We're very central. We're very well served by transit. New Westminster has 5 SkyTrain stations. In our teensy little geographical footprint, we have 5 SkyTrain stations. There's nothing like it anywhere else in the region, and it's really advantageous to us. It results in a huge transit mode split for New Westminster, and we rely heavily on that. It's very attractive, so the riverfront all the way along New Westminster has a lot of really interesting opportunities to connect. We can't help but think about connectivity when we think about New Westminster and we think about the river. Looking at how we connect to the rest of the region, we all know what the congestion is like in New Westminster, but try to think outside the connection and think about outside the congestion and think about the SkyTrain network. Think about other ways that you can get there. The Patello Bridge is a fantastic link between our 2 cities. With the new Patello replacement project, you're going to see far better services for people cycling and walking. You'll be able to connect from New Westminster all the way to this location in Surrey on multi-use paths, on separated bike lanes, on a fantastic network of walking and cycling infrastructure. When you enter New Westminster on the other side, you'll connect directly into our Greenway network in New Westminster and be able to traverse the city from that fantastic locus of connection there at the north end of the Patello Bridge. It's important when we look at this to make sure that we don't just focus on the congestion, because it's easy to be victims of our location as well. Being so central, having so much traffic go through the city could be the only thing that we focus on. It could be the only thing that we try to fix, but we've kind of flipped that a little bit. We've flipped it and used our location to our advantage, used all of our SkyTrain stations, all of the great transit, and particularly the riverfront to remind people that there's more to New Westminster than the road network. So, the only slide that I have here that isn't about connectivity is the one that's about continuity. Continuity means having parks and greenways along the entire length of the river, bringing people not just to one location, but to a number of locations. Having said that, we've got one particular location that really is a destination and that really is kind of the focal point of our riverfront, and something that lays the foundation for how we're developing the riverfront vision, the level of quality, the feel that we're aiming to achieve through the entire riverfront vision. Westminster Pier Park was constructed a few years ago. It's a multi-award-winning park. If you've not been there yet, I encourage you to go. It has a number of different attractions within the park. The park itself attracts passive recreation, but it also attracts events. It attracts people to the river to experience the river, to be closer to the river and to experience events that relate to the river. It sets a standard for the character and the quality that we're aiming to achieve. And it's an important part of that continuous network of greenways. So you can come to the park and hang in the park. You can come to the park and enjoy a concert or an event, or you can just pass through the park on your way to other destinations. Getting into the park, right now we have 2 ways to get into the park, one of which is the 4th Street elevator and staircase, which was completed in 2016. So this provides a fully accessible way to get into the park. As you know, in addition to greenways and SkyTrains and roads, we also have other trains in New Westminster. So getting across the train tracks onto the riverfront is a challenge. You can't just place crossings wherever you want to cross the rail tracks. So we built this grade separated crossing to get pedestrians and cyclists, in particular people with mobility challenges, into the park. It also provides a lookout platform, and it also provides some interesting lighting as an attraction in and of itself, in addition to being functional. The type of connectivity that we're talking about is really not about motor vehicle connectivity. It's challenging to get to the riverfront by motor vehicle. So the River Market estimates that about 50% of the people that currently access the River Market do so by transit or on foot in some way. lately by ferry as well. Driving to the river market can work. There is some parking down there, but by far the easiest way to get to River Market and Fraser River Discovery Center and other destinations along the river would be not by motor vehicle. Having said that, it is possible. There's half of a parkade left. A few years ago, we took down the other half of the parkade. So after studying parking downtown, it was determined that about half of the parkade was underutilized. So we made a bold move and took down half of it. I can tell you that the remaining half is very well utilized, so we're not contemplating removing the other half. Cities around the world will ask you what happens if you take parking out. The sky does not fall, it opens up other opportunities. And the opportunity that it opened up for us was the creation of the Front Street Mews. So it daylighted a frontage road that existed before. It enabled us to turn that frontage road into flex space. So we refer to it as the Front Street Mews. It's a little road that borders Front Street, which is a truck route. Day to day, it's parking. It has a number of accessible parking spaces. It provides loading and servicing for the adjacent businesses, provides short-term parking for the adjacent businesses, but it's flex space, so it turns into event space very easily. The image on the far, your right, is an image from Fridays on Front. So the Downtown Business Association hosts a street party every Friday in the summer. I encourage you to come down. It's really fun. So it's 2 blocks of street party. There's food trucks, there's live music, there's beer and wine, and there's just an opportunity to socialize. We keep the ferry running late that night so that people from Queensborough are able to easily access Fridays on Front via ferry as well. And it's just a great opportunity to bring the community together. When we're not partying on Front Street, there are opportunities to sit and enjoy the space and be close to the river. So you can see in the central image, there's public seating available. It's fun, it's playful, it's made of trees that came down in Queen's Park, I believe. I'm just looking at Dean. So you know, there's a connection in a number of ways. The remaining bit of the parkade, it turns out, provided a great substrate for public art. So we kept the second half of the parkade, and we used that as an opportunity to put some art up. Birds on a Branch is a large-scale installation by artists Jacqueline Metz and Nancy Chu. Provides a playful touch on an otherwise industrial kind of structure. And it serves to connect. So I don't know how many of you have been across the SkyTrain bridge looking at New Westminster, but you can see the birds on the bridge from the SkyTrain. So you're connecting from there and you're connecting at ground level as well. Another important connection along the riverfront, I missed an image, is one that doesn't yet exist, but it's under construction. This is Boza Development's Pure West development. It's going to comprise of 2 towers, one 53 stories high, the other 42 stories high, in addition to a 3-story commercial building, which will have a daycare, restaurant, and other commercial space on the bottom. This is transformational. So this will convert that empty lot that's on the riverfront. Well, it's not an empty lot anymore. They're building a big bathtub there now to build the towers. It will convert that empty lot that served as surface parking into towers. It's important to note that this was many, many years in the making. One of the things that attracted Boza to this site is that we had already developed a lot of the riverfront nearby. So Westminster Pier Park had landed by the time Boza came and expressed interest in this. The River Market and the Fraser River Discovery Center were there. So this is kind of the crown jewel on this area. It completes it. It completes Westminster Pier Park, completes the connection along the riverfront in that location. So we're quite excited about it. What it also brings is another connection for pedestrians from Columbia Street via the remaining bit of the parkade, continues to be useful, over an architecturally designed overpass, down a fully accessible ramp into the park. So we'll be able to get people into and out of the park regardless of ability through this structure, which we're collaborating with BOZA Developments on. What about further east? So those of you who are familiar with our riverfront downtown know that you can only go so far, and then you hit water, which is great. It's a nice place to look at the water, but how do you connect over to the other parts of the city? The vision for that is a floating greenway. So we've developed a concept design to about a 30%, plus or minus 30% cost estimate. We've got about a quarter of the funding in place to build a floating greenway, 6-meter wide concrete floats connected along the river to connect people to Sapperton Landing Park and to complete that missing link in the regional greenway network. This is a really important piece of infrastructure, not only for us, but for the region as a whole. It brings you right down onto the river and enables you to get not only between destinations in New West, but between destinations in the region. Just about done, Anita. Am I doing okay? And what about points west? So we have our lovely Queensborough. How do we make sure that we're not forgetting about beautiful Queensborough over there on Lulu Island? Queensborough has its own riverfront. There's a fantastic river walk in Queensborough. It's very much worth a visit to get close to the water and to experience the river from that part of New West. In 2011, a little over 7 kilometers of new trails were added. Features a fully accessible network of river trails, benches, vistas, lookout points, and a public dock. The Port Royal community has also built up on the tip of Queensborough. There's a medium-density community there now developed by Aragon. There's additional development occurring sort of in the adjacent lots near Port Royal as well. So it's becoming more and more of an important place for people to live, work, and play. It remains industrial in Queensborough, which is really interesting. There's an interesting mix and an interesting push and pull between the importance of the industrial activity there and people living there. And finally, how do you get there? How do we connect between Queensborough and the other parts of the city? There's been a long-standing desire by the city to build a pedestrian and cyclist bridge. We've studied that, we've looked at the costs, we've engaged with important stakeholders on that, and it's a really challenging thing to achieve on a working riverfront. So we piloted a ferry. A couple of years ago, we did a short-term demonstration. Last year, we did a full year of pilot every day throughout the year, running 2 12-passenger water taxis, and it worked. So we've moved almost 100,000 people in the last year by ferry between the Port Royal community in Queensborough and the quay. So we have a dock just under the inn at the quay, and then we have the public dock in Port Royal. That those 2 locations serve as our ferry terminals. We're continuing to run the service. It's become part of our operations now. It's embedded in the operating budget, and it's something that we plan to continue to operate into the foreseeable future. So to conclude, if I were to sum up the success factors here, I would say having a clear vision supported by key stakeholders is really key. Being able to visualize what the whole thing is meant to be, how it's meant to feel, is really important. Understanding your values and sticking to them, I think, is really important as well. The city values accessibility and inclusion, sustainability, equity, and vibrancy. So the riverfront isn't only for a certain group of people, it's for everybody, and it's challenging sometimes to serve that broad spectrum, but those values have been expressed in pretty much everything that's been done on the riverfront. Some big moves are required. So Westminster Pier Park was a very big move for the city. The Pier West development is a very big move. Taking half the parkade down was a really big move. The ferry is a very big investment for the city. It's a big move that's making a big difference. These big moves are stitched together by thoughtful programming, partnerships, and a commitment to serving the community. So at the end of the day, the reason that all of this exists is for the people who experience it. So not losing sight of those people has been an important element in the success as well. Thank you very much. stole the clicker. Thank you.
I think there's a presentation there too, isn't there? Somewhere. In the back. Go.
There it is.
Oh, there it is. Thank you. So thanks, everyone. My name is Jeff Scott. I'm the president and CEO of Fraser Surrey Docks, but I'm also chair of the Fraser River Industrial Association. So I'm pleased to be here today to have this conversation to raise some awareness and discuss ways to unlock opportunities along the Fraser River. And I'd like to thank Anita and her Surrey Board of Trade staff for putting on this very important forum. Today I'm going to talk a little bit, I'll give you a little bit of background of Fraser Surrey. I'll talk a little bit about the Fraser River Industrial Association, and then I'll talk about one specific opportunity, which is short sea shipping along the Fraser River. And we start out with this view, of Fraser Surrey Docks, looking from the new Westminster side across to Fraser Surrey Docks into Surrey. So that's a nice picture of the facility there. A little bit of background on Fraser Surrey. So we've been operating effectively and efficiently and safely on the Fraser River since 1929. We are nestled between the Patello Bridge and the Alex Fraser Bridge, and our central location provides a competitive advantage in the Vancouver Gateway due to our superior road and rail connections, and that can be utilized to increase fluidity and reduce transportation costs. We are located roughly about 28 kilometers from the mouth of the Fraser River, and from a sailing time perspective, that's roughly 6 hours from the Victoria Pilot Station, which includes a 2-hour sailing up the Fraser River. And our combined large footprint, we have room to expand, and again, we can offer a competitive advantage that is unparalleled within the Vancouver Gateway. At just under 200 acres, we are the largest multi-purpose facility in the Pacific Northwest. We have 7 deep sea berths, we have 4 ship-to-shore cranes, and a large fleet of mobile equipment. We have extensive rail capacity. We have over 50,000 feet of on-dock, near-dock rail, and that is accessible by all Class 1 railways, both in Canada and the US, and that's unique in this gateway. The terminal is adjacent to the new South Fraser Perimeter Highway, connecting FSD to the Lower Mainland, United States, Western Canada, downtown Vancouver, and terminal capacity in downtown Vancouver is constrained, and so our connections to road and rail network do create that unique competitive advantage in the gateway. As I mentioned, we've been operating safely and efficiently on the river for over 90 years. We started out as a 1-acre grain facility back in 1926, and we actually handled the very first grain vessel in the Port of Vancouver. In 1961, we were acquired by Johnson Trucking, and in 1991, we were acquired by a group of Hong Kong businessmen. In 2007, we were acquired by Macquarie Infrastructure Assets, and just recently in May, it was announced that we've now been acquired by DP World. So what does multi-purpose means? Multi-purpose means we handle everything essentially from soup to nuts. And we literally have. So in these pictures, you'll see containers, you'll see the new stacker reclaimer for West Shore Delta Port. We've handled steel in variety, steel pipe. You'll see some talc and tote bags in the picture. There's tires for the mining industry. There's bulk commodities. There's forest products. It really covers the whole spectrum of commodities, goods, and trade. Containers, we've been handling containers since 1974. We've always been a niche player in the container market, servicing smaller vessels, unique services, smaller destinations. We have a Mediterranean service, we have a North Europe service, we have an Australian service, and we do have an Asian service. So we get service through the Panama Canal on some of those services, and we are growing. Over the last year, we've quadrupled our container volume. And so we've had significant growth in the last year. Another commodity, a very big commodity for us, is steel. Steel has been a core commodity for us since inception, and we've handled that commodity since the early 1960s. Steel is used throughout Western Canada in the oil and gas, in the manufacturing industry, in the automotive industry, construction, mining, and transportation industry. And we continue to be a market leader in the handling of steel products through this gateway. We've also diversified our commodity base, and in 2011, we successfully partnered with Parrish & Heimbecker. Parrish & Heimbecker is a 125-year-old Canadian grain company operated by the Parrish and Heimbecker families. They service more than 10,000 farmers and producers, and they move agriculture products to over 40 countries around the globe. Volume, we started in 2011, it grew relatively quickly. We were anticipating about a 500,000 metric ton facility. Last year we handled 1.2 million. And in November, we received a permit to expand that facility to 4 million metric tons. So that's including the JV. So we'll be handling about 5.5 million metric tons of agri through that facility once it becomes operational in 2020. There's also a variety of other general cargo, and again, general cargo includes pretty much everything. We've handled the Grouse Mountain windmill you see in the picture there, so we handle the components for that project. We've handled components for the hydroelectric projects. We handled the Evergreen Rail, came through our facility. We've handled many of the distilling tanks in the new craft breweries around Vancouver have come through our facility. We've handled buses, planes, helicopters, a lot of the firefighting helicopters, trains, automobiles. We've handled live cattle, live horses, yachts, and a variety of mobile equipment. And we've even had the odd television shoot or movie shoot. So I'm going to switch and talk a little bit more about the Fraser River in its entirety. As Stephen had said, it has a very long history, starting with the Stolo First Nations. But in terms of its industrial activity, in 1808, Simon Fraser navigated and actually charted the Fraser River. In 1827, the first fur trading post was established at Fort Langley. And in 1858, they found gold at the bottom of the Fraser River. And that's important because that's the year when they actually started dredging the Fraser River to increase accessibility. In 1894, we had a record flood in Mission, and shortly thereafter, the diking system was created. And in 1948, the second largest flood in history occurred. It broke the dikes, and a more comprehensive dredging program was initiated to maintain the integrity of the dikes. Today, the Fraser River allows a navigational depth 365 days of a year of about 11.5 meters. In 2015, a group of industrial users along the Lower Fraser created the Fraser River Industrial Association. And this group was formed in response to the economic importance of the Lower Fraser River report, and that was commissioned by local chambers, including the Surrey Board of Trade, in July of 2014. As a result of that report, FRIA seeks to raise the profile of the Lower Fraser River as a key component of our local, our provincial, national economies, and draw attention to the opportunities for sustainable growth and expansion for the Gateway. FRIA was formed to be a representative voice of businesses that operate along the Lower Fraser, and we serve as a forum for discussion, for dialogue and exchange of information, as well as identification of opportunities for cohesive action on mutual issues of interest. And currently we have 11 members. You see on the slide there a quite diverse group of 11 members, and we operate the industrial members along the Lower Fraser River. In terms of economic impact, a couple points on this slide. How important is the Fraser River economically? Vancouver Port, as many of you know, is the largest port in Canada, and it's the third largest port in North America by tonnage. Last year, the Port of Vancouver handled 140 million metric tons, so that's the entire Port of Vancouver. So looking at the Fraser River itself, the Fraser River alone within the port creates 55,000 family-supporting jobs, 3.4 billion in wages, 5.6 billion in GDP, and $12 billion in economic output per year. That is significant. How does that compare to the St. Lawrence Seaway? St. Lawrence Seaway continues to get most of Canada's attention, and Ottawa's attention for that matter. In the St. Lawrence Seaway's 2012 report, they reported that the Seaway produced 63,000 jobs, 2.9 billion in wages, and 9.8 billion in economic output. So how does that compare? It's slightly more jobs, the same GDP, but the Fraser River produces 2 billion more economic output than the St. Lawrence Seaway. That is significant. However, despite that significance, the St. Lawrence Seaway gets hundreds of millions of dollars per year on ice breaking alone. They get additional federal funding, and the Fraser River continues to get no funding and limited attention. So there is a significant disparity in terms of how the St. Lawrence Seaway is looked at compared to the Fraser River, despite its economic significance. So what are we doing within FRIA to change that, create some awareness, create some understanding, and create some dialogue? We are promoting awareness understanding through our 8 key strategic initiatives. They guide our purpose, they guide our decision making, and they guide our action plans. The first 4 that you'll see is stakeholder engagement, industrial land, channel improvements, access. Stakeholder engagement is all around building alignment through meaningful dialogue with critical stakeholders, communities, governments, and First Nations. Industrial land is about promoting the efficient use, sustainable expansion, and protection of industrial land. Channel improvements is all about optimizing the safe use through the navigation improvements and waterway management. And access is about ensuring we create and maintain fluidity to reduce congestion and pollution through effective transportation strategies. The other 4 remaining strategies, marine and public safety, is about improving safety practices both on and around the water by all users, whether that be industrial or public users. Stewardship is about respecting biodiversity and ecosystems and implementing policies, procedures, and programs to support that. We're also focused on competitiveness, which is about ensuring the environment within which we operate is fair, equitable, and ensures the ongoing economic sustainability. And of course, the regulatory process. And that's about ensuring that the permit process remains rigorous and robust, but well-defined and clear in terms of timing, in terms of expectation, and in terms of requirement. And every year, on an annualized basis, we look at these strategic initiatives and we create action plans around those to move our overall action plans forward. So what opportunities exist on the Fraser River and why? The Fraser River presents an immediate and cost-effective access to existing infrastructure. We do have availability of industrial land. We believe it's an underutilized marine highway, which stretches from Delta Richmond, past Surrey, New Westminster, up through Mission towards Hope. Rivers are a critical part of the transportation network in the rest of the world and the east coast of Canada, but not yet in British Columbia. And I think we have to work hard to change that. But rivers do offer flexibility, connectivity, and capacity. So one opportunity I'd like to share today is short sea shipping. A recent Metro Vancouver study that's been completed over the last couple of years explored the potential for expanding short sea shipping as a means to reduce truck traffic congestion in our region. It improves air quality and relieves pressures on industrial land. And what can be handled through short sea shipping? It includes the movement of goods and or people for that matter. In Vancouver, we have a huge variety of cargoes that can be handled by short sea shipping. This includes containerized cargo, it includes steel cargoes, dry products, dry bulk cargoes, agriculture, aggregates, liquid bulks, really across the spectrum, and any and all commodities can be handled in terms of short sea shipping. In terms of short sea shipping, there are some hurdles. In terms of, I talked a little bit about the considerations, but some of the things that create some hurdles and challenges in moving short sea shipping forward is looking at things like overall transportation times. So looking at how those times compare to road and rail. Looking at additional costs. It is more expensive to handle product through the short sea shipping network, and so we have to do a better job of looking where we can save costs elsewhere. Do we have enough industrial land to establish and maintain support services such as warehousing, consolidation, deconsolidation, staging, assembly, manufacturing? How do we maintain and access those lands on an ongoing basis is also another consideration. And how do we get and maintain stakeholder commitment towards moving these short sea shipping initiatives forward? And I know you've probably heard, and we've heard, short sea shipping has been discussed probably for the last 15, 20 years and hasn't significantly gotten off the ground. And we just have to do a better job of understanding the challenges and hurdles and then coming together to create some action plans to overcome those. But the good news is we do have industrial land available. The other good news is there is a significant portion of industrial land that is available along the Fraser River. So we do think that there's an opportunity there. And in terms of how that all circles back to Fraser Surrey Docks, we believe that we are in the right location. We have capacity. We have established networks. We have the container handling capacity. We have the bulk and agri-bulk handling capacity. We've handled general cargo. We are centrally located in Surrey. We have access to road and rail, and we have available capacity. So in summary, I think the future looks bright. The sun is rising on Fraser Surrey Docks and the Fraser River. And I look forward to continuing our discussion on the panel and the board and exploring some of these opportunities together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and to all of you. So I think there's a microphone, or there's going to be a microphone for the panelists to respond to questions. So ladies and gentlemen, are we ready to brainstorm? We have a good 25 minutes. So go to the microphone, indicate your name, your organization, and your comment, question, or idea. But I just wanted to say, as all of you are thinking, that we received such great media attention on this Hot Topic Dialogue from the Vancouver Sun and CBC the last couple of days, and I didn't realize how hot this topic was. I had a developer come and meet me last night. He said, I have a vision. For the waterfront. I shared it with then Mayor Watts in 2000, but nothing happened. And then another realtor, there's so much potential, she said, on the waterfront. Let me help you. And then another marine expert as well. Just 3 people right off the bat. So, it is a hot topic. I think all of us want to be able to envision a great future for our city of Surrey. So, any questions from the audience or comments? Please go to the microphone. So what about flooding? So when we're talking about climate change, and we're talking about not only industrial development, we're talking about tourism destinations. Can you talk about flooding and climate change and how we should incorporate that within our plans?
You want to start?
Absolutely. So I'll start with that as well. Just by starting perspective, dredging is a component. It is an important part of maintaining flood control. I had talked about the diking system. The reality of the Fraser River, it has been dredged for over 125, approaching 150 years, I guess, at that point in time. And one thing we have to recognize as a community is that if we don't continue to dredge the Fraser River, it will silt up and it will create some pressure on the diking system and our flood control management. There's some varying reports in terms of how much that would silt up, but we're looking at things around 6 meter to 7 meter, which would start impacting tug and barge movement, which would start impacting recreational users and those sorts of things. So it is an important part in terms of an ongoing flood management dredging control mechanism. But I think we can do that in concert with industrial development. I think we can do it in concert with community and development and just doing the right things in the right places and thinking about the whole strategy as you look at development and expansion.
Yeah, and maybe I'll add, we had a dialogue last year with the Fraser Basin Council, and it was specific to flood management planning. And one of the things and they did a report, done a couple of reports now, about what the impacts, the economic impacts could be on the Lower Mainland and the province. If there was, Jeff talked about 2 biggest floods ever, if there was a third one of those. And the flooding, particularly by knocking out the railways and the transportation, the impacts probably are even bigger than the port shutdown you avoided, Jeff. They're just astronomical. The challenge, like everything, is we know, they say they know what needs to be done, but how do you pay for it? And it's this classic infrastructure, and it needs government funding, federal funding. And maybe getting back to Jeff's comment about we're a long way from the St. Lawrence and Ottawa, we don't get the attention to that that we should. And unfortunately, and I really hope this doesn't happen, that it doesn't take one of those floods to cause those huge damages to our transportation network to force governments to fund the kind of diking and the changes that are needed to avoid these kind of impacts.
Lisa?
They've said it all. I don't have anything
Okay.
further to add.
So what about the cruise ship industry on the Fraser River? Is that possible? Is dredging a concern as it relates to the cruise ship industry?
Maybe I'll start with that. One of our former mayors in New Westminster, Wayne Wright, that was one of the pet projects that he had. Could we bring up smaller size cruise ships up the river? And I know it's been looked at. I know there are significant cost challenges with that. The river itself also provides a challenge. It's a river that, while it has depth, the tides, and it does have tides, and the currents are very, very strong. But I think on that one, like some of the other things that I talked about, I think you have to acknowledge there are going to be risks, but you have to be entrepreneurial about how you want to approach the risks. And so I'm not saying, and I don't have the expertise to say that cruise ships would work, but some kind of opportunities that allow boats, pleasure crafts, whatever, to come up and dock and experience our communities all the way up through Mission. I think there are opportunities there, but you have to look at them in a non-traditional way and be willing to accept some of the risks that maybe in the past you would go, oh no, the risk of that is too great.
I'd like to add to that. So I think it's a really interesting idea, and I agree that there's a lot of great potential there, and certainly something worth pursuing. There are a number of challenges that need to be well understood up front, and working on water in the marine environment from a city scale transportation perspective is really challenging. And one of the things that we've learned with the Fraser River through our experience with the ferry and through the casino boat that we used to have docked downtown is the navigational channel. So there are a lot of really interesting and challenging interactions to be aware of and that would need to be overcome. So docking even a small pleasure craft adjacent the riverfront in New Westminster is very, very challenging. There are very few places where that can occur in a manner that keeps those moored vessels out of the navigational channel and out of potentially harm's way should anything go sideways. So it's something that we're looking at. We've not necessarily cruise ships, but looking at other opportunities to more pleasure craft or to more ferries. And one of the big challenges is the potential for interaction with the vessels that are on the river, with it being a working riverfront.
And I'll just add a couple comments to that. I support the initiative as well. I think there's great opportunity to connect with communities in a meaningful way. So something that it should be looked at. In terms of the dredging itself, a couple of components. I had mentioned that the navigational channel is 11.5 meters. I think one thing that's important to know is that can be increased to 13.5 meters without removing the George Massey Tunnel. So there is additional depth that can be achieved with the George Massey Tunnel in place, and that would change the dynamics in terms of the vessel size that can come up the river. So it's really about that depth. It wouldn't necessarily change the look of vessels coming up the river, but you would get more cargo, more volume, and deeper vessels potentially on there. So I think that's important to understand as well. You don't need a new bridge. You don't need a new tunnel. You can do that now.
Yes.
Rory Morgan, law firm Hamilton Duncan. I'm just curious about how much the cities work together as far as the building on the economic opportunities, because it seems to me that a lot of it is city by city working within their own area, but not actually working together or exploring opportunities. Because I see what New Westminster is doing is fantastic. I know Coquitlam is starting to develop the riverfront with residential along where the sawmills used to be, and I'm just kind of curious as to if there is any will there, or why there isn't much happening between the cities.
So thank you for the question. I think it's an interesting one, and I think a dialogue like this sort of provides an opportunity for that exploration. So is there anybody from the City of Surrey in the audience today?
No, they weren't able to attend.
Okay, all right. I'm not going to answer on behalf of Surrey, but I can give you some of our perspective from New Westminster. We're fairly busy with what's going on within our own city. However, we can't we can't ignore the location that we hold in the region, being central. When we look at our neighbors, we see lots of potential, particularly in terms of the Greenway network and in terms of the river network itself. Coquitlam is advancing with, or the developer is advancing with plans for the Fraser Mills site, for example. We see that as a great opportunity to improve and complete a connection on that section of the Greenway network as well. In terms of working with Surrey, so we certainly did when it came to the Patello replacement project, and the thinking around how the replacement Patello Bridge will connect into each of the communities. It was really important to us that we landed very good Greenway connections on our side, and it was very important to Surrey that they landed very good connections on their side as well, seeing it as an opportunity to move people by sustainable modes further into the center of the city. So on that level, that kind of work is happening. We haven't talked to Surrey yet about the ferry. I think there's a conversation there. I think there's a conversation around using the river to move people, not just for tourism purposes, but for transportation purposes as well. And I look forward to future conversations when City of Surrey is in a place to have those discussions.
I think the other opportunity, recognizing exactly what Lisa said, that cities are busy with their internal functions, and then there's also oftentimes, or can be, politics that affect relationships as well. But I think the opportunity becomes for groups like ours, the Discovery Center, like municipal museums, like some of the groups that Jeff's got, which come from different areas. We can all work together and drive this agenda if we want. And if we move it forward and it looks like it works, the cities will come along with us. And we have to be entrepreneurial. I mean, at the Discovery Center, we always say that, yes, we're in Westminster, but the river goes everywhere. And so we look to build relationships both towards the ocean and up towards the Rockies, and feel that we can, because the river brings different benefits to different communities in different places. And so that's something that we can do. We can talk to Surrey, we can talk to Delta, we can talk to Richmond in a different capacity, and we can make headway even if the actual municipal governments don't get involved.
I just love the way he thinks. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mike Mysak with FTG Squared Solutions. I'm a business consultant. I just had a quick comment and a question. I grew up in Manitoba on the Winnipeg River, and although having spent a lot of time on boats on the river, when someone actually put together a dinner cruise type of thing on the Winnipeg River, I had experienced the river in a way I had never seen it before, so it was fantastic. So I would really look forward to seeing something like that happen on the Fraser here. Question for Lisa. Congratulations on what the city's done with the parks. I think there was a speaker here a couple of years ago, Fred Kent, who talked about placemaking. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He talks about taking something that's underutilized and turning it into a fabulous community resource and a place where people want to be. Can you talk about a little bit about the process and maybe lessons learned on how you got to creating the corridor and the parks and the plans and where you're going, lessons learned and maybe what was done right to get the plan in action? Oh, and sorry, one other thing, and about bicycles. Do you have bicycle connectivity through that network as well?
Thank you for the question, and I'm going to start answering, and then I'm going to invite my colleague Dean Gibson to expand from the parks perspective as well. Dean is the Director of Parks and Recreation at the City of New Westminster. So in terms of connecting to the community, like I said, I think that's one of the real success factors, is that there is a very big commitment for the riverfront to belong to the community in New Westminster. So just the value and the sentiment and the philosophy behind that is very consistently applied. New Westminster is also a very engagey place. So there's a very significant commitment to public and stakeholder engagement. Everything we do involves a formal stakeholder engagement process. Outside of that formal process, there is constant engagement with the community. It's a small enough place that we're having conversations and building relationships all the time through various interactions, through comments and questions that come directly to the city, but also through the various more formal engagement activities that occur. The mayor and council are very hands-on in the community as well, so there is a constant dialogue going on. In terms of lessons learned, you know, when I look at some of the great work that's been done by the Parks and Rec Department in terms of parks development, one of the key success factors is being very open to what the community has to say, and being willing to sort of change your mind midstream. So sometimes staff and elected officials will have an idea about the direction that something ought to go, and if that's the only option and you're trying to sell that option, you end up hitting walls quite frequently. But being open to the possibility that there's different ways to think about things, I think is really important. The bike network, so we have greenway networks that the greenways in the city are meant to be for people who are walking by any means. That includes wheeling in wheelchairs or with other mobility devices, and it includes cycling as well. So the riverfront is meant to enable people to cycle to it, but also to cycle through it and to pass through. We don't have sufficient space to have sort of a high-speed commuter network for cycling in addition to a recreational network that brings people there. So we will be designing this in a manner that encourages cyclists to slow down through the built-up park area of the riverfront. So it'll be a little bit different than some parts of the seawall in Vancouver, for example, where commuting is really an important part of that network. We just don't have the space to have a dual track kind of network. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and just some of the lessons learned, like if you had to do it again, what might you do differently?
I'm gonna hand that one, Dean, do you mind addressing that one? Just because I think that relates more to the park development that it's occurred necessarily than the transportation network.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Dean Gibson. I head up the Parks and Recreation Department for the city as well. And I've had the benefit of living in the city for a pretty long time and working there for most of my career, so I've been able to see sort of the evolution of change on both sides of the river itself. I think one of the real important lessons learned was actually predated my involvement with the city, but it was a piece that was made reference to in sort of the history of the chronology of the evolution of sort of the industrial timeline on the Fraser River. And a key turning point for the city would have been back in, I think probably in about the early 1970s, early to late 70s, when the nature of shipping changed. And for those of you that are in that industry, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but container shipping changed the nature of the New Westminster riverfront, where they used to haul goods on flats and pallets and bags or raw logs, and that all left when container shipping came in. And so the important lesson, I think, for the city of New Westminster learned at that point was you need to move with the times. And these are my words. You need to recognize when opportunities are leaving your community and how those new opportunities will come in. Now, for the benefit of Surrey, the shipping, you guys were able to leverage that opportunity on this side of the river. You had the land to be able to support that. You had the rail connections and have been quite successful in leveraging that. For New Westminster, that hasn't been part of our future. Our industrial land base as it interacts with the river is a piece that has left us. And we could have chosen to take an approach of trying to cling and retain it and provide incentives, but the reality was that wasn't where industry was taking us on the Lower Mainland. So the next question became how do we replace those jobs and economic drivers in our community? And B, what do we do with this land along the riverfront edge to bring value to it in a new way that it wasn't able to bring for us before? So hence you see a lot of the things that Lisa was able to share with you in terms of very, what I would think, deliberate and long-term planning based on a vision, and that vision was a community developed vision. It was one that's been embraced by successive city councils over the year. Even though we've had changes in political stripes at our local level, that vision has remained intact for us. On the economic side, one of the other components that we have identified for us is leveraging, again, on the transportation networks that are so key in our city has been the creation of our broadband network that's been in the ground. So essentially, New Westminster has invested significantly in putting that dark fiber in the ground, connecting it to, and this is not an area of my expertise, so which is obvious, but connecting it so that businesses that do need that capacity, a new way of shipping, it's the shipping of information and bits and bytes, and shipping that through our network that the city has involved has begun to bear fruit for us. So we're now seeing a lot of small and medium-sized businesses showing interest in the city by virtue of the fact that we've got a great quality of life because of some of these amenities that we are helping to foster along the riverfront. We have great access to transportation for people to get to and from our communities. And we have this new shipping network for shipping information and technology in a very affordable and very, very fast way through our community. So those are some of the things, but this is 2019. We're going back as early as in the 1970s where the genesis of all that began. And I wish some of our local politicians could be here, but that's really where I think that triangle of the local community, the business sector, with your local government involvement have to come together to have that shared vision to be able to move forward, and also looking with it from a very long-term horizon, because these are generational changes that occur. They're not things that you can build into a 5-year or a 10-year strategic plan and think that you're going to turn the corner as a community overnight.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Very interesting contrast between sort of where the economic drivers have been. And in my world of parks and recreation, I'm always sensitive to what's happening on the riverfronts from a public access perspective. That is not always necessarily congruent with some of the industrial and commercial uses of the Fraser River. We have all sorts of interesting conversations with the Port of Vancouver about their land acquisition strategies along the riverfront edges itself. And I'm interested from the panel just in terms of the perspective of how do we balance out those what I'll call community uses of the river, and then also the commercial and industrial uses of the river? Because I have a sense that they can coexist, but I think it's an interesting a topic of interest of mine, because more often than not we seem to be coming at it from an adversarial perspective as opposed to a cooperative perspective. And so just understanding some of those, where the challenges are and what the opportunities might exist, I'm curious if the panel has some other thoughts.
I can start with that one. And I appreciate your comments, Dean. I think that was a good perspective on the history of everything as well. I think from my perspective, what you're seeing is conflict in overall initiatives. And I think what we have to do is come together with one cohesive strategy. I think there's a bit of panic going on as well. So in terms of industrial land, I think there's a recognition that it's leaving and people are reacting, such as the port and others, saying we have to protect, we have to protect, we have to protect. And that's a reactionary response, and I think it then conflicts directly with people who have other strategies or other visions. And what we have to do is come together and look at the overall strategy. So we have to look at that combined strategy, because we have a workforce that needs to live in the communities as well. We want them to be happy in those communities. We want them to be connected in those communities, but then also have a workplace where they can live, work, and play in their own community. So from my perspective, it's really about the groups need to come together and create one cohesive overall strategy that combines that vision of use of industrial land, access to industrial land, but then the combined efforts and needs of both parties in terms of how do you divvy that out, and how do you utilize those across all demands and all sectors.
Stephen?
Yeah, it is a really interesting question, and thank you, Dean. And I agree with Jeff that we do have to look at it as an overall strategy, and I think the way to look at it, in order to do that, is to look at it from an overall sustainability perspective for the river and for the communities. And by that I mean, don't just look at an either-or, industry and jobs versus recreational use by the public. Because if you look at all the factors together, that's where your strategy would work. 2 examples. Salmon. Fraser River, historically the greatest salmon river in North America, one of the greatest in the world. It's been able to do that while also being a transportation highway for all of the goods that are shipped in and out. And even today, with all the concerns about the status of certain salmon, Chinook, for example, Fraser River Chinook, we've had Dr. Brian Riddle from the Salmon Foundation come out and talk at our dialogues and say, the Fraser River is fine. Even with all of the industrial stuff going up and down and everything. There are things going on in the Salish Sea that are concerning, and they don't know what's happening. But the fish and the birds are living fine with all the industrial activity. That's one example. And the other one, and Jeff kind of had it on his last slide, but we talk about it all the time at the center. Short sea shipping, right? Some people see that as, oh, more boats, more container terminals on my land. That's ugly. I don't like that. I'm being facetious here. But if we did that, the traffic congestion benefits of trucks that wouldn't have to go into the port every day and drive everybody crazy during rush hour, and then the diesel emissions from them sitting idling while they wait to load and unload, those would decrease significantly. We have a part of our exhibit at the center. You can create your own river, and you can do it from an environmental, social perspective and economic perspective. The pure environmental perspective of the river shows lots of short sea shipping in the river, because that's the best solution for the social side in terms of transportation and the environmental side in terms of air emissions. So this is an example. If we look at a strategy that looks at all of those things together, that's how we'll bring together and figure out what the best way to go forward is.
Yes, go ahead.
My name is Emily, and I'm an archaeologist. I've lived in Surrey for about 12 years now, so it's been really exciting to see what's happening here. I've worked on a lot of local projects for municipalities who are starting to discover, the potential of their areas, and they're developing all these really nice facilities, like really new trails and sorts of things, and there's been a really reactionary sort of response to heritage management. Obviously, the Fraser River is a very sensitive area for First Nations. They have a very long history here. I've worked very closely with a lot of the First Nations, including Katzie First Nation, for about 6 years. And I was wondering if the Surrey Board of Trade or the City of Surrey has any plans to be proactive in heritage management prior to development, maybe using early planning tools such as archaeological overview assessments and that sort of thing to kind of gauge where heritage might come into play, both for economic development or just sensitive sort of considerations. On that note, I am currently working with another municipality who is also kind of pre-planning some major development in their area, and they have come up with this great idea of partnering with local First Nations to actually complete that kind of work. So we're working with them on building sort of a predictive model for heritage management where there's not necessarily known archaeological or heritage sites, but the potential to find them based on First Nation sort of knowledge of the area. So I was just wondering if that's something that's been in consideration with all of this sort of development.
Well, just to address the Surrey Board of Trade's perspective, I think that's so unique. I've never even considered that. So I'll take that to our development and land use team, and of course, in our work with the city. Thank you very much. Any responses to that?
Yeah, so Emily, thank you. Those are really thoughtful comments, and it's something that we struggle with as a city, to be honest with you. I mean, I think historically or traditionally there's been an approach to stakeholder engagement where First Nations communities have been kind of treated as stakeholders. And I think it's taken some time, but local governments are coming to the realization that that's not an appropriate approach to take anymore. Having said that, we're all on a learning curve to figure out what the appropriate approach is. So the City of New Westminster, our mayor and council have expressed very clearly that they want to get this right and to right some things that may have been done differently in the past than we might looking forward. So this is something through their strategic initiatives that they're looking at in terms of reconciliation, but also in terms of looking forward. So this city has endorsed a vision. It wouldn't be correct to say that that vision is globally endorsed by all of the nations impacted or influenced by it, or that should have influence over it as well. So I think the approach that we're taking is a relationship land-based approach. Let's really understand whose land we're on and what it means and how we relate to one another going forward and reconciling the past. So it is not an easy one, and we certainly haven't figured it out, but I appreciate the comments.
Yeah, it is a really good question. A little story. Back during the Canada 150 celebrations, my family and I, we went back east. I went to Ottawa, Montreal, the Maritimes. One of the things that struck me was in the museums there, the First Nations history in a number of the museums was told from a First Nations perspective. Not just the names, so in the First Nation language, but from their perspective, and whether it was oral or written or different ways of doing exhibitry. And I came back here, obviously I work with one of the interpretive center. That doesn't happen here very much, if at all. So I went back in my conversations with the Musqueam, and I said, would you guys be interested in something, and I'll come back to the definition of something that would tell the history of the Fraser River from a First Nations perspective? And they got really excited about that because it doesn't exist in general, and specifically it doesn't exist about the Fraser River. What could that look like? I think the important thing there is the First Nations, and I'm talking the Musqueam, but it would have to be all Fraser River First Nations, they need to define what that means to them and how to develop it and how to talk about it. Is it oral? Is it exhibitry? Is it visual? Is it programming? Is it information? But that it come from their perspective. And the other thing, and this is purely how do you get it done, because they are another level of government, and that's law, they can then go to other levels of governments and companies like Jeff's and say, listen, we're going to do this as part of reconciliation in response to the UNDRIP. We would like you to support this financially so we can do this. And I think governments and partners would do that. So that's a specific idea that we've come forward with. It's just at the discussion stage right now, but I think it would go a long way to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I agree with Stephen's comments, and just a little expanding that. One thing we've done as FRIA is invited First Nation groups to come and talk to us. So we've had Musqueam come, we've had Cowichan First Nation, we've had Tawasin First Nations to really tell us their story, create some understanding and awareness, and then perspective. And just to start that dialogue, I think it's an important step forward. So it's really about finding opportunities to create that dialogue and discussion.
Just my final question to you is, we have another 1.3 million people moving into this region. By 2050, it's estimated Surrey is going to be the largest city in British Columbia by 2040. And we're looking to attract businesses from all over the world, in addition to, having a cohesive economic development strategy for the Cascadia corridor. What is the role of the Fraser River in the future in the advent of that significant population increase?
My recommendation would be to look at major port cities around the world. Port cities that are larger than ours, larger than Surrey, larger than Westminster, and see how they've managed to do that and live together with all the different things that are going on. Anyone who's been to New York, anyone who's been to Europe, to Rotterdam, some of those places, you can live together with major transportation of goods. You can live together with people living right on the river. It's actually a selling point for a lot of those developments. And people using the river from a recreational point of view. And with First Nations people in terms of making sure that they're involved and it meets their needs. The river has always been there. And if we take care of it, the river will always be there. But let's understand it sustainably and use it to try to move forward as all these people come into our region. I think it's a huge, huge opportunity that we have to think about how to involve the river.
So I think it's a great question, an interesting one in the context of this region. So I think a really important factor is to think about it in a regional context and consider all of the municipalities that exist along the river, in addition to the First Nations that are so connected historically and today with the river. So taking a broader regional approach and a broader sort of multinational approach, if you will, to it, I think is really important. New Westminster has done a number of things as a city and within the city, but connecting that out thinking about the connections to the rest of the Greenway network, for example, thinking about it in terms of how goods and services and people move throughout the region from a connectivity point of view, from a transportation point of view. That's really where the magic is for me when I think about the river and the value of it and how it relates and what the potential really is. It's more than just a city by city approach. It's an integrated multi-jurisdictional approach, and I think understanding that and figuring it out early on is really foundational.
And I would concur with both Stephen and Lisa. I think they probably took my 1 and 2 in terms of what I would do. But, I agree in terms of looking around the world and seeing great examples of great port cities that have been very, very successful for a lot of years. That's the first. The second one is pulling together that integrated strategy in terms of moving forward. I guess the third one for me is we have to get on with it. So we have to stop talking about it and actually action it. And we have to do it in a meaningful way and bring parties together. I know the 2014 report, that's almost 5-6 years ago now. There was reports prior to that time. Before we know it, 10 years will have passed. I think to Dean's point in terms of preventing this conflict that's occurring between these different strategies that are occurring at different times, we have to stop, we have to come together, and we have to create that overall aligned strategy, and we have to do it now. So someone has to take charge, someone has to step up, and someone has to pull these groups together to create that overall strategy.
And one last question from the audience. Yes.
My name's Darlene Seligman. I'm Vice President of Arctos Developments. I'm a resident of Surrey since 1988, and our business has been in Surrey since 1997. My question is there a plan to keep, some space for industry on the water? Because for me, I would like to move my factory to the water because I have a marine-based business. And I'm concerned that when I have that ability to move, there won't be any room for me to move. And is it more, from a tax perspective, more beneficial to have residential and condos on for the cities, or and is that why one of the reasons that the plan seems to be taking space not being available for industry?
So I can only speak from the New Westminster perspective, and to some degree from the regional perspective as well. There is a commitment within the region to keeping the limited industrial land base that we have. So the City of New Westminster has pockets of industrial that will remain industrial. And that's consistent, in my understanding, across the region, where the value of that industrial land is well recognized, and the concern over that industrial land shrinking is becoming better understood, and those lands are becoming more protected. So within New West, our Braid Industrial Area, for example, there isn't a plan for that land to develop as residential. The plan is for it to remain as industrial. I can't speak for Surrey.
I'll just make a general comment. I think you raise a good point, and it's something I've talked to Stephen about before in the past. But and it's great to see so many people out here today, because the first step is that understanding and awareness. And I think what we lack as a community is a true understanding of what in terms of industrial land, in terms of the port, in terms of the river, in terms of all those things, in terms of community, what it means for the community, and how it interrelates, and how it interacts with each other. And I think what we have to do a better job is come together and have that dialogue to create that understanding of needs, expectations, understanding of why it's important. And I don't think we do enough of that. And I think that starts the dialogue as well, if we can do a better job of creating that communication.
Yeah, and just really quickly, I agree. I think we're living to a certain degree on the industrial land side with stereotypes from 40, 50 years ago, right? Ugly, lots of dirt, pollution, all that kind of stuff. And that's not what we're talking about when we talk about industrial land development these days. And same with the job. I mean, Jeff talked about jobs. What are the major issues for millennials and others today? How can I afford to buy a house? Is there enough money for education and healthcare? Well, maybe we need to start talking about industrial land and the jobs and the industries. Those are jobs that will allow you to get a down payment for a house. They will contribute to education funding. They will contribute to healthcare funding, and that's what people want. So look at it a different way. Don't look at it in the old stereotypes. Let's look at it in a modern approach to industrial land.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, our panelists, a round of applause. So we do have a gift for you, just a lovely Surrey Board of Trade pen and pencil that you're going to use each and every day. Thank you so much. And to continue the dialogue, the plan, again, to reiterate, the Surrey Board of Trade's development and land use team, our international and industry team, are going to take the lead on this. And if you want to join the Surrey Board of Trade or tell others about it, so they're part of this visioning process, please check out our website, businessinsurrey.com. Just a couple of reminders. Next Friday, we have BC's Tourism Minister at Surrey's Art and Business Awards taking place right here, Friday, June 14th. We also have the 55th Surrey Board of Trade Annual General Meeting, and we're talking about the pipeline. And just also we're featuring the Surrey Health and Technology District, robotics, artificial intelligence, all of that at a business networking reception next Thursday night, June 13th. So ladies and gentlemen, make it a great business day. Thank you.